Welcome to One Thought at a Time, where we get curious about what makes us tick. I'm Ian Travers, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Ant Sahota.
Hello.
Our guest today is a really demonstration that you're never too young to be a success. Welcome, Ruben Stanislaus.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's great. We had a good conversation at Goodwood Festival of Speed, and I can't really wait to get into today's conversation. So for those people who don't know, so tell us, Ruben, what do you do now?
I race in the Zero Prototype Championship in a Praga R1, whilst balancing a few other jobs as well. But my main focus is racing at the moment.
Tell us about many people who aren't into motorsport will wonder what is a Praga. Okay. I've had the benefit of I sat in one at Autosport.
Yeah.
Just try and describe for someone who doesn't know what one is. Just tell us a bit about it.
In the simplest form,
yeah,
a spaceship on wheels.
Spaceship on wheels. I love that. Yeah, they look like a spaceship on wheels too,
they do.
To be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a Le Mans prototype, like an LMP3 car, but a 3/4 size one. Similar sort of lap times around UK tracks, and very heavily aero-based car. About 360 brake horsepower, and it can produce like 2.5 times its downforce when you're doing 150 miles an hour.
An insane amount of grip.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. So you have to have basically a lot of commitment when it comes to driving that car. Yeah, you got to drive it fast. I can imagine if it's aerodynamically tuned in. Yeah.
The faster you go, the more it grips.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the experience of being in it, it's not for the claustrophobic, is it?
Not at all. No. Luckily, I don't suffer with that.
No.
But once you have the doors down, it's very compact in there. Not a lot of room.
Yeah. And so, and what kind of speeds are you getting up to on some of the circuits?
About 160 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Down Silverstone and Hanger Straight. Hit.
I can imagine the drag though acts as a part of that.
Yeah.
It slows you down a bit.
If
it's
it didn't
mainly
have the aero,
your cornering speed is where it's going to be like incredible. Yeah.
If it didn't have all the aero, it'd probably do at least 180.
Yeah.
But it's really around the high speed corners where you can just.
I bet do you feel some of the G-force in your neck? Because especially because we spoke about last time we met actually at Goodwood Festival of Speed, was the whole how you went from club, how you previously raced in club level.
Yeah.
It must be a very different beast, sort of jumping into an aerodynamically tuned in car because you've got muscles that aren't normally worked. I mean, when you're racing, like, say it could be anything like a BMW Compact or, I don't know, a Porsche Boxster or something at club level, you don't necessarily get all that G on your neck.
Not at all.
So, tell us a little bit more about how you've managed to sort of adapt to that and what it felt like first time experiencing that.
Very, very odd. The first time I experienced it, because obviously I came from go-karting, which is physically demanding, but in a completely different way. So you're using your body to move the car about.
Sure.
But when you're in a Praga, it's literally the car is moving you about. So you have to make it like an extension to yourself, and understand how the car's going to grip, because the car's going this way, your neck wants to go that way.
Of course, yeah. So have you implemented new sort of strategies in terms of your workout? Because it's a very unorthodox way of working out. Well, today I'm going to go for a run, or today I'm going to work out my neck.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Tell us about your sort of physical preparation.
Yeah. So when I'm in the gym 4 times a week. Typically about an hour session that I do. Start off on the rowing machine just to engage the full body. Mainly working on upper body because a lot of arm strength. We've got no power steering in the car. But what was a shock was the leg strength that you actually need. Because in go-karting, it's not really, you don't really need that much strength in your legs. But when you're braking, you have to press with about 100 kilos of pressure.
Wow.
So I wasn't used to that. When I first got in the car, I was only doing 80%. So now I'm at a level where I can do 100%, but I had to do a lot of leg press and training.
That's a lot of pressure on the brake pedal, isn't it?
It is a lot. But when you're moving, when you've got the G-force of you braking, that helps press the pedal as well. So you're basically standing on the pedal.
Wow.
Of course, but and also how long are your races? So like obviously you've got to do that consistently for say 40 minutes or for 20 minutes, half an hour stints. I mean that's a lot of workout.
It's a lot. It doesn't look like it. You see it on TV, you think you're just sitting down turning, but when you're in the car, it gets very hot as well. It's like doing a workout in a sauna.
Of course.
Yeah.
How long would it typically take you to recover after a race?
I'll say to the point where I'm like feeling normal, probably about 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days after. So it's knackering when you've got one race and then another one 2 hours after for half an hour.
Yeah.
It's always the second race, which is difficult.
Right. And is that because you're physically tired at that point?
Literally shaking, sweating, the lot. Test days aren't too bad because at least you can stop when you want. You have your breaks. But on a race day, the first one's typically all right, the first race. But then the second race, that's the one that gets you. Yeah.
It just sounds awesome, though, doesn't it? It does. It just sounds awesome.
So tell me a bit about the documentary. So you obviously were featured in a BBC documentary. Tell us a bit about the documentary and how that came about.
Yeah. So the documentary is about my journey in motorsport, basically, with my teammate Lewis Appiagyei, and we both started in go-karts when we were 4 years old. I met him when I was 6, I believe.
Wow.
And it was nice to sort of show that we've come from Buckmore Park, just at our local tracks.
Yeah.
And we've always had a dream of being in F1.
Yeah.
And it was basically documenting the steps of how to get there, really. So we did a load of different races. We did MX-5, Clio Cup cars, and then that ultimately led to the Praga, which was filmed in the documentary, and then basically brought me here today.
So, how did the documentary come about? You know, because that was great to be featured in it. How did that even happen?
It was a mix of doors just opening at the right time. So we had someone from the BBC, Stephen Mizelis. He reached out to me and Lewis, and he was like, "We like your story. Right. What can we do to help you?" Basically.
Yeah.
So at the time I was 17 years old, so I just had my driving license for the road, and I couldn't race the Praga because I sat in the Praga the year before. I did like an experience day at Silverstone, and it was like, how are we going to make this happen? And that's when the BBC reached out to us. So it was basically the bulk of the program was getting my race license to be able to race the car.
Right.
So we had to have 6 signatures, which was completing 6 races, marshalling, doing all different stuff just to get a race license. And yeah, that's sort of how it came about.
And what's happened since that? That must have helped in your career now. Anyway, what was the benefits from doing that documentary?
A lot of exposure. Did breakfast shows, BBC Morning, radio shows, but also just from sponsors, it made my name heard. Yeah. And that helped fund me for this year. We've had Toxic Waste come on board, Speed Sense, Storm Watches, Redefined via VIP. We've had quite a few sponsors, which I'm very grateful for. But it's always an uphill battle trying to find the budget to race, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to having the talent to be able to drive, but that means nothing if you can't afford it.
And of course, if anyone is interested in reaching out to you after seeing this podcast, you'd be more than welcome for them to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us a bit about the story then. How did you end up getting into karting? Or, you know, what's the story? Because you've been very successful in a very short space of time.
Yeah. So I've had my race license less than a year, and I've done about 4 rounds, and I've won 2 of those. So for my first year, I'm quite happy with that. But the actual start of it was when I was 4 years old, literally watching Formula 1 with my dad on the TV. Right. And I saw Lewis Hamilton going around, and I said to him, I want to do that one day. So we went down to Buckmore Park, which is my local kart track. Yeah. Just in the electric karts, they went 5 miles an hour. But as soon as I sat in it and did my first race, I loved it, and I was hooked from then. So since that point, we just progressed up through karting. So I did Bambino karts, won championship in that, had lap records in that, and that's when my dad saw there's something in me, and he believed in me, basically. Did Honda Cadets, mainly in the Kent Cup, won the Kent Cup. Yeah. Always wanted to do Super 1, which is at the national level of karting, but again, budget just wasn't there to do that. Yeah. And then went into Mini Max, which is from like age 14 upwards. Yeah. But by the time I got to the grid, there was 2 people on the track, because everyone went into X30, which is a similar speed, but again, more expensive. So at that point, it was like, where do we go from here? We could keep throwing money at karting or look at racing, like in cars, where there's an actual career path. But again, you've got the issue of funding it. Yeah.
So I get the inevitable question here is, when you go back to being that age, and I'm having difficulty remembering what it's like to be at that age, because it's significantly further ago for me than it is for you. But we have dreams, you know, I want to be a footballer, I want to be a this, I want to be an F1. And for a lot of people, that doesn't succeed beyond a few Christmases. You know, you might get a few pictures or a toy car or a football strip. What was it, you think, that meant that your dream is continuing to develop and become a reality. What was the difference?
I think it's taking away distractions from my goal, because I've always been focused on being a racing driver,
Right.
And there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with it, and I've always loved the sport. So to me, it's not really felt like a sacrifice.
Right.
But I suppose to other people, you're obviously learning what you like, and open to everything. I've always kept an open mind, but racing has always just been my passion, which I can't really explain why it is. It's just something that's sat right with me, and it's made me feel like me.
Yeah.
And obviously being fortunate to have the backing from my parents, funding bits myself as well, because I've got my own businesses which I buy and sell stuff to help fund my racing as well.
Yeah, and shoes. There's a great photo, isn't there, that I've seen? I mean, it was at Goodwood, in fact.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that, because that's a business you started.
Yeah, it is. So I've always been a entrepreneurial-minded person. Even back in primary school, I had I don't know if you know about FIFA, the game, football game.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So there's a currency in the game that you can buy packs with and players with.
Of course.
So I used to buy and sell FIFA points in year 5. So I'd make a quick £20 a week doing that. But I saw there was a method to make money. It was, I buy it for this price, I sell it for a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that progressed into selling cookies and Lucozades in secondary school.
Right.
Made a little bit more from that. And then naturally, I learned the ways of business, how to make money from buying and selling.
Yeah.
So I went into reselling shoes, which I'd buy a shoe for, say, £100, sell it on for 150. So I make a little bit in that shoe.
Yeah.
But then once you see there's a method to do it, it's just a case of multiplying it. So I used like Snapchat, Instagram, connections I had in my school, mainly send to my friends in school. Then they'll sell to their friends, and it just kept growing and growing.
So there was a means to an end in that, because you haven't ended up as just being an entrepreneur. It's an entrepreneur, but actually who's got their eye on F1.
Yeah, that's it.
And that is, do you see it as a means to an end?
Sort of. I mean, I knew that racing in itself wouldn't be a stable career, and I had to have something else that I could either fund it with or rely on if it didn't work out. So it's been more of like a safety net.
Yeah.
Because obviously everyone wants to be an F1 driver, but the amount that actually get paid to do it is so slim.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic to just say that's what I'm going to be and completely lock it off at that.
Yeah. But you've got your eye firmly set on that, right?
I think, well, it's always been F1, but now that I'm actually in the racing world, I'm open to more things now. So say Le Mans and like GT racing, I think is a more viable path, because I've been working at Silverstone as an instructor, and I'm talking to racing drivers that have tried to go down the Formula route, and so many have said that's not the way to go anymore unless you've got massive backing behind you. There's a path and there's a career in GT racing in Le Mans, LMP, in America, Europe.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? There's been a number of people who have gone from F1 and ended up racing at the Le Mans 24 Hour, the World Endurance Series.
Yeah.
And I know when they've been interviewed, various ones, they've all commented that they've actually ended up enjoying that more than they did the F1 space.
Yeah. As much as I love to be in F1, it's a very much so a business, which, if you know how to play it right, is good, and you're able to do that. Then but in terms of actual racing, then I think Le Mans and GT is the way to go.
And don't forget, like, as a driver, you do this because you're passionate about it.
Exactly.
And like, even from my perspective, like we were speaking about off cameras, like even when I had to try and raise money for a certain series or whatever, when it gets to a point where the money side is starting to sort of put you off, and sort of you realise, like, I would rather just race something that's going to make me happy and actually something that's viable. There is a turning point there in it, and you have to do it because you're passionate about it, and not let anything deter you from it.
That's it.
But you should never ever let something, especially at your age, deter you from your future goal in F1, because I think you should go for it, my man. I think you should absolutely
I'm definitely
go
going
for it.
Yeah.
And actually, even these teams like Mercedes or these bigger teams, they put a lot. If you can get picked up by one of those drivers,
that's it.
That'd be incredible. As like in a sponsorship package or some kind of like affiliate program. I don't know.
Yeah.
And you've met Lewis Hamilton, haven't you? You've interviewed him, in fact.
I interviewed him. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that. Yeah.
That was a very surreal experience. Very down to earth guy, and it just felt like a normal conversation with someone I've known. We were able to relate on a load of topics. but mainly just speaking about, it wasn't even just racing itself, it was racing and life off the track, being a better person, how you can help other people, what challenges he went through, which I was able to relate to, and just even just talking about fitness as well, like running, what sort of goals he set, and how that implemented him in his racing and got him to where he is.
Yeah, and how did the interview come about? How did that happen?
So that was part of the Born to Race documentary. We went to Brackley, the Mercedes headquarters beforehand, hoping to see him, but he wasn't able to make it, and there was quite a few issues getting the licensing to be able to interview him. Yeah. So we went back the second time, and that's when I was able to interview him.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
And has he stayed in touch?
Well, he's a busy guy. He's very busy. But he said he'd be watching our races. So
great stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure if he ever saw you trackside, he would always come up to you.
Of course. Yeah,
I mean, he's an incredible influence, isn't he?
Yeah.
So let's just talk a bit more about the journey. So you mentioned about at the start the support of your parents was important. So tell us a bit about, because I can again just imagine the conversation. Mum, Dad, I decided I want to be a racing driver. Don't be silly. Tell me how did that support manifest itself?
Well, I mean, when I first said I wanted to be a racing driver, I think my mum was a bit worried. I've always liked engines and wheels, so I started off actually in motorbikes, and then we sort of came to a middle ground with stick on 4 wheels. It's a bit safer, so I went into karts. But as I said, like when I started karting, my dad saw that I had something in me. And
what do you think was the something he saw?
I think it was the difference to the other kids whilst I was racing. I was always very focused. If they were going around in the wet or in the snow, people were spinning off left, right and centre, and I was the one that managed to keep it on the track and come back in first. Yeah. But yeah, even after the race, I would be the one that would try and do my own mechanics on the car. Right. I wasn't on my iPad or scooting around in the paddock. Yeah. I've always liked the whole environment of racing, both on and off the track. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, your dad's off camera today. I know he's your sort of support team. Do you always see eye to eye when it comes to the racing?
For the most part, we do. We get on well. Obviously, there's areas in which he passes off some work to other people, or like data coaches. He wouldn't have a clue, so he'd go and chat to whoever knows. But I think it's the support and the mutual respect we have for each other, which I would take his advice very, very seriously. And he'll listen to me, we'll listen to each other, and then come to a proper decision at the end of anything.
It sounds like to me it's like that thing about where people focus on their end goals, but really it's all about falling in love with the process of getting to your end goal, rather than just going, I want to be this, and just saying I want to get. It's the process of getting there. It's jumping through the loops. It's jumping over the hurdles, and actually like. It sounds very much like that in that response, that you love getting involved, you love helping out, and and even on bad days you still are in love with the process, and I think that's a very important sort of thing to have, especially when you've got a big goal like F1. So.
Yeah, I'm loving the journey. It's been an amazing journey.
Yeah.
And it's celebrating small victories along the way, not getting distracted or letting it get to my head, and in the process I always know where I want to end up, and this is all part of it, but of course you have to enjoy it, otherwise what's the point?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's really quite something, isn't it, enjoying the journey. I think, I mean, I get involved, not so much now, but I used to coach beginner runners quite a lot, and the number of people who wanted to tick off a half marathon, if you're just going to tick it off, that's going to be a lot of hard work. Why don't you think about enjoying the journey to get there?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's such an empowering thing as well, isn't it? It's like that process sometimes is a long haul thing. It's a long commitment. So it's like anything, you want to enjoy the process of getting to that point, and I think that also makes it a little bit worthwhile, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Biggest influences along the way. Who or what has influenced you most, do you think, on your journey?
I'll say in terms of a driver, it has to be Lewis Hamilton. I'll say Ayrton Senna as well. I've taken a lot from his style of racing. But in terms of a person and being in motorsport, I have to give credit to Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he's the one that got me into racing in the first place. It's always been my idol. Right. And I wanted to not just follow in his footsteps, but take it further than that and
Yeah.
expand upon his legacy as well.
Be quicker than him.
Of course. What's the point? You might as well be.
I like
Might
that.
as well.
Yeah. In a nutshell, I just want to be fast.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Okay, who else?
My dad.
Okay.
In terms of perseverance and the mental aspect of it, I'll say that's definitely to him. And also my mum as well from a more caring aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely my family as a whole. And that's very important to have a supportive family, and I'm very lucky to have one.
That's great.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about the mental fitness side. So how do you get yourself ready for a race?
I mean, I think I'm different to most drivers. I think most have like a ritual beforehand. They'll listen to music or put their gloves on in a certain order and stuff like that. I'm more jump in the car and drive. I do like my peace and quiet beforehand. So say 15 minutes before a race, I'd make sure I've got enough fluids on board. I drink and go through data. I think that's sort of my ritual. I like going through data beforehand, just before I get in the car, talking to the mechanics and the engineers. So I know when I go out in the car, I know exactly what I need to do.
Yeah.
And having a plan before I race. If I'm starting in third place, am I going to push up the inside, or am I going to sit back, let second go in?
Right.
I like to plan out the race beforehand, and that's how I sort of prepare to get in the zone.
But pretty much it's get in the car and then
Go.
go.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of my earlier guests in the first series, a guy called Richard Marsh, who's raced in GT, and he also got the opportunity to race. I think it was for an Aston Martin sort of demo type race at Le Mans, and his quote is one that will stick with me for ages. And he described sat in the garage waiting for his go, and he stood up with his bottle of water. He handed it to the team manager and said, "Hold that. Watch this."
Yeah.
So that's probably more akin to your.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. I think if you overthink it, you get in your own head.
Yeah.
So it's just let your instincts do the work.
Yeah.
And trust, what you've built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Tell me on the journey. You can't avoid that motorsport is predominantly white at the minute. Have you found that race at all has been a barrier at all as you've been on your journey?
I have. There's been instances where it definitely has been. When I was karting, I believe I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
I was disqualified from a race for going too quick. And they said it's physically not possible for me to go around that quickly. And they disqualified me from the race.
Right.
And accused me of cheating, when there's absolutely no way you could even cheat in it.
Right.
It was one of those moments where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
noted.
Okay.
Yeah, use that as a
You
bit
see
of fuel that
Exactly.
passion, fuel that fire. Yeah.
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 But it's not a case of dwelling on it. It's moving on and doing the best you can, basically.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a couple final questions. I can't believe we've been talking for so long already.
So
I
quick.
could talk for ages on this. So I ask this of every guest, and that is, let's assume for 1 minute that we can conquer time travel. You get the opportunity to write a letter to your younger self.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, what do you think you'd write?
I think the main thing would be never giving up, because there's definitely been times where it's felt impossible to progress anywhere, but also keeping your eyes open to any opportunity that could come about, because it's things that you could never imagine would turn into something else that have sort of led to this point today. So even instructing at Silverstone literally came from going down to Turn 1 simulators, which is a sim place, which I went just for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And the landlord of that saw me on the sim, and he liked me. We got talking, and he said, "Do you want a job at Silverstone?" He was a chief instructor at Silverstone and Lewis Hamilton's ex-boss. So from then, that led to a job in instructing. I've now got an instructor's license, talking to drivers, and ultimately led me to racing in Praga now. So definitely being open to any opportunities that come towards you, whether it seems insignificant or not, and fully exploring it.
Fantastic. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
We also like to ask a question from a previous guest that has left. And I think the one we're going to use here is So you're obviously busy. If you could find 5 minutes extra to dedicate to yourself tomorrow, how would you spend it?
I think recording a song in a studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more.
I like music.
Okay.
I would say making music, but I wouldn't call myself an artist. I've been dabbling and exploring in music for about 5-6 years. I like making like beats and recording, rapping. So yeah, that's sort of my escapism. So if I had 5 minutes, I'd love to just record.
Fantastic. In that case, we're jumping on the track together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I guess lastly, Ruben, you get the opportunity now to leave a question for a future guest.
Okay.
What would you like someone to answer?
What is your drive, I say? What is it that keeps you motivated and persistent in pursuing whatever they're pursuing?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great question.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ruben, it's been an absolute joy having you on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we both wish you all the absolute best in everything you choose to do next. I
Thank you
look
very
forward
much.
to following your career. And maybe we'll have a conversation either in the Le Mans pit lane or the F1 pit lane
That would be
at some
great.
point.
I look forward to it.
Ruben, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben.
This has been One Thought at a Time with our guest this week, Ruben Stanislaus. And if you have been, thanks for listening.